Albert Einstein was a nonconformist, a rebel, a humanist, and funny. He never boasted of his achievements. Even when the press did, his disheveled exterior reflected his inner humility. As he once said, I speak to everyone in the same way, whether he is the garbage man or the president of the university. The young Einstein was slow to develop, and his parents feared he'd never talk. He began speaking only at age 3. When Albert was 5, the Einstein hired a private tutor for him. The boy threw temper tantrums so severe that his face changed color and he completely lost control. He once even hurled a chair at a teacher, scaring her away permanently. In 1885, with the closest Jewish school too far away and too expensive, the Einsteins sent 7-year-old Albert to a Catholic institution. In 1889, he transferred to the Whirlpool Gymnasium. Impatient with its emphasis on humanities, Einstein rebelled against all authority, and his teachers responded in kind. One instructor even considered Albert's very presence in class disrespectful, while his Latin teacher declared that he would never amount to anything. A Jewish medical student named Max Talmud was the first to spark the child's interest. A frequent guest in the Einstein's home, Talmud supplied young Albert with popular books on science, technology, mathematics, and philosophy. Albert's father, Hermann Einstein, failed in Munich, and the family relocated to Italy, where he and his brother opened a new company. Albert stayed behind in Munich to complete his studies, but he was so frustrated and bored at school that he ran away to his parents' home in Pavia at age 16 with no high school diploma. In autumn of 1895, Einstein traveled to Zurich to take the entrance exams for the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, ETH. Though his mathematics and physics scores were high, he failed every other test. Physics professor Heinrich Friedrich Weber noted Einstein's proficiency and suggested he sit in on his lectures. But Dean Albin Herzog insisted that the young man first complete his secondary education. After a year at a school in Aarau, outside Zurich, Albert passed the institute's entrance exams. The liberal educational atmosphere in Switzerland, in stark contrast to the rigid discipline he had been used to in Germany, played a crucial part in Einstein's decision to settle in Switzerland. Aiming to teach mathematical physics, Einstein enrolled in a teaching certificate program at ETH. His instructors included Professors Adolf Horwitz and Hermann Minkowski, the latter of whom pronounced Einstein a lazy dog, never bothered about mathematics at all. Professor Weber was impressed by Einstein's intelligence, but not by his diligence. You have one fault, Weber scolded him. No one can tell you anything. Einstein was a free thinker, outspoken, tactless, and disdainful of authority, and many professors kept their distance. He had little respect for Weber, a traditionalist in whose hands science seemed to lose all luster. By the time Albert earned his diploma, Weber despised him. Swiss-French professor Jean Pernet, who taught experimental physics at the institute, also had problems with Einstein. His failure to attend class infuriated the professor, who gave him the lowest grade possible. In June 1899, Einstein's hand was severely injured in an explosion in Pernet's lab. Eventually, Pernet told his wayward student, "There is no lack of eagerness and goodwill in your work, only a lack of capability. The professor added that Einstein obviously had no idea how difficult physics was and should try medicine, law, or philology instead. I feel I have a talent, Herr Professor, Einstein answered. Why shouldn't I at least try with physics? Professor Pernet ended the conversation abruptly. You can do what you like, young man. I only wanted to warn you in your own interests. Classmate Marcel Grossman shared his lecture notes with Einstein. The latter recalled, he abounded in the very gifts I lacked. He was a quick learner and ordered in every sense. Not only did he attend all eligible courses in our stead, he also wrote notes so neatly. In preparation for the exams, he lent me these notebooks, which for me were a lifesaver. What would have become of me without them? I would rather not write or speculate. In July 1900, EDH awarded Einstein a diploma and a certificate to teach mathematics and physics. But with his record and Weber's hostility, an assistant teaching position there was not an option. Einstein applied for various jobs around Europe but was rejected. His lack of income was an even greater concern because his application for Swiss citizenship requested proof of employment. Einstein's mind might have been full of innovative ideas about the essence of light and the electrodynamics of bodies in motion, later to become known as the theory of relativity. But his attempts to find work were dismal failure. He was constantly changing jobs, living from hand to mouth. Suspecting that Professor Weber was responsible for his rejection by every academic institute he applied to, he wrote to Grossman. I could have found a job long ago had Weber not played a dishonest game with me. All the same, I leave no stone unturned and do not give up my sense of humor. God created the donkey and gave him a thick hide. Finally, in February 1901, Einstein was granted Swiss citizenship. His new nationality helped him find work as a temporary teaching assistant at the Winterthur Technical School and in Schaffhausen. That November, Einstein submitted a doctoral dissertation to Professor Alfred Kleiner of the University of Zurich. The paper was rejected in February 1902, probably due to its harsh criticism of Ludwig Boltzmann's theory of gases, although Einstein's work also lacked experimental verification. Grossman and his father intervened on Einstein's behalf and convinced family friend Friedrich Haller, director of the Swiss Federal Office of Intellectual Property, to offer him a job. Einstein was hired by the Patent Office in Bern as a temporary level 3 technical expert, earning a meager 3,500 Swiss francs a year. In a letter to his close friend Konrad Habicht, Einstein wrote that his 8 hours of work at the Patent Office left him 8 hours a day plus Sundays for fooling around. Even at work, he jotted down ideas on slips of paper, stuffing them into a drawer whenever his boss approached. Thus, Einstein developed the sensational theories he published in 1905, his miracle year, and a turning point in scientific history. Einstein submitted 4 revolutionary articles to the German Annalen der Physik scientific journal that year. On quantum flight, the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, special relativity, and matter-energy equivalence. Einstein signed his paper on relativity, Bern, June 1905. Many physicists sought out the author at the University of Bern. No one thought to look for him at the patent office. Once again, Einstein submitted a doctoral dissertation to Professor Kleiner, this time choosing a less radical thesis. He received his PhD on January 15, 1906. But Einstein still couldn't secure even a temporary lecturer's position at the University of Bern. His application included his 17 published articles, including the one on relativity. The essay was reviewed by Professor A. May Foster, a conservative, mediocre scientist who claimed he couldn't understand a word. Frustrated and angry, Einstein decided to look for a job as a school teacher, but his friends convinced him to submit a new article in keeping with classical physics. This paper on radiation finally won him a position at the university, though he continued working at the patent office. Einstein gave his first lectures on radiation theory to an audience of 4, 3 being his co-workers in the winter of 1908. Only one student persevered into the summer of 1909, and the course was discontinued. That year, the University of Zurich offered Einstein his first professorship. He came into class in unkempt clothes, his pants too short, and a watch dangling from an iron chain around his neck. Yet the moment he opened his mouth, his students were smitten. Einstein has plenty in store for the world of science. Sitting at his desk in the patent office in 1907, he imagined an experiment involving a person falling from a rooftop, an idea that led to the general theory of relativity. He developed the theory over the next 8 years, initially publishing research that contained incorrect equations. He worked night and day to revise them. I am often so engrossed in my work that I forget to eat lunch, he wrote to his son Hans. Einstein often compared scientific innovation to music. His best ideas occurred to him while playing the violin. He took the instrument everywhere and played at every opportunity. Einstein first used images to solve problems in science. He first imagined thought experiments. Words as they are written or spoken came later, when he expressed his discoveries through the language of logical connections. Einstein told Max Wertheimer that his thoughts did not come in any verbal formulation. I very rarely think in words at all. A thought comes, and I may try to express it in words afterward. Einstein immigrated to the US in the early 1930s, joining the Institute for Advanced Study, IAS, in Princeton, New Jersey. At the IAS, while his theories inspired other physicists to delve into quantum mechanics and its implications, Einstein continued his lonely search for a unified field theory that could explain both gravity and electromagnetism. This quest occupied him until his death on April 18, 1955. He was known to withdraw into his office, close the drapes, and scribble equations for hours on end. Sitting with colleagues, he had often switched to his native German in order to think more clearly. When even this tactic failed, he would run his fingers through his mane of white hair and announce in his best English, "Now I will a little think." As Einstein grew older, he continued to assert that quantum theory had to be incomplete because of its random nature and the degree of uncertainty it assumed. A firm believer in determinism and causation, he argued that the full theory had yet to be discovered. Many physicists insisted that the theory should stand as it was, but Einstein famously countered, God does not play dice with the universe. When Weizmann, the first president of the State of Israel, passed away in 1952, a Jerusalem daily suggested that Einstein replace him. David Ben-Gurion encouraged the notion, and Abba Eban, the Israeli ambassador to the US, was instructed to officially propose the position to Einstein. The idea first reached him by way of a short New York Times article, a week after Weizmann's death. Convinced the piece was a joke, Einstein laughed it off until journalists began pestering him. Several hours later, Eban's telegram arrived. So Einstein told Eban he couldn't be president of our state of Israel. Ben-Gurion was relieved, having decided it was a terrible idea. 2 days after sending the telegram, Eban met Einstein at a reception in New York. The ambassador was glad to have put the entire chapter behind him, especially when he saw that Einstein had arrived in full formal dress, but as usual, without socks. Thank you for listening to this lecture.